Hey everyone, welcome back to my shop. I've got this slab of maple sitting here. There's some spalting at the far end. I wanted to make a waterfall bench, but there's such a twist in this that I would be flattening it for days and there'd be nothing left. So I decided I would make a table. This particular piece, the live edge is straight up and down for the most part, so I could use either side of this. The other side is, it's okay. You can see I've got mold here, some white, some black. That means I'm not getting enough airflow in the barn when this is sitting there trying to dry. This side, it looks good, but I think the other side is more interesting. I think this is really interesting, and there's some nice kind of coloring here. So I'd really like to see how this turns out. There is what looks like bark inclusion here, so that's going to be quite soft. I'll fill that with epoxy, which is about as much as I do with epoxy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the difference between my 4-foot mark at the far end and the 4-foot mark at this end. Here it's about 1/4 of an inch, and over here it's about 3/4 of an inch. I played around with it a little bit already, and it seems to settle out at about 5/8 of an inch on both sides. So I am going to even it out, clamp it down, and set up my flattening jig. I'm still a little low on this side and this side, and my router bits are starting to burn the wood a bit, so I'm going to take that off and sharpen it. I'm only going to come down a little bit more, I think. I do want to get rid of the majority of the saw marks. I really don't mind if there are some saw marks showing in the finished product, because I think it makes it look like it was an actual piece of wood. I think that's about all I'm going to do for flattening this side of it. I'm still about 1/4 inch low over here, but that'll sand out, and I don't mind it if it still has some of the saw marks in it. I like the way that looks. I like this bark inclusion here. I'll put a butterfly here. I just don't know if I should put like a clear epoxy here or black. And I think I'd like to keep a bit more of the far end of the table here. So I will use hand planes or just a power planer just to knock this down and get this even with this part here. But I think that's enough that I can cut this and work on this a little bit. All right, that's got me pretty close. I think I just used the jack plane. I think what I have to do now, if I flip it over, there is a big crack running along here. I don't flatten the bottom. It takes just as long as it does to flatten the top, and nobody looks at the bottom, and you're not going to get paid for it. So what I do is I just route out a couple of spots for the base to mount to, and I just make sure that both of them are parallel with each other. But I've got a big crack going here, and I'm pretty sure this is going to go all the way through, and I need to fill that with epoxy to stabilize it before I route out that pocket. So if I flip it over, but do I do the top or the bottom? Or do I tape this side or the other side? I call this part paralyzed by indecision. All right, I figured out what I want to do. I'm going to tape up this side, all the cracks, and then I'll flip it over, and I'm going to fill the cracks on the bottom with epoxy so that I can route out the pockets for the feet. So there's a couple days of filling here, just in stages, top and bottom. And in the meantime, I can weld up the legs. For the tape, I just use blue tape, and a lot of it. I think this is the crack right here. It's pretty small on this side, but it's pretty big on the other side. That's it, flipping it over. I mixed my epoxy. I just put the coloring in, so I'm just gonna give that a mix. I've got my charcuterie boards all laid out here. Quite often I'll put like a little silicone dam around the hole I'm trying to fill, and then just overfill it because it does sink in, and I want to make sure that there's plenty in there. I didn't do it on here because there's still a lot of work to do on the bottom side here, so I will just fill that, and I think it's going to take a lot. I'll probably end up doing more than one batch, and hopefully it doesn't come out the bottom. Glasses would be helpful as well. Ooh, that's much better. I used up all my epoxy. This big crack still needs more. I won't add any more till tomorrow morning so I can confirm that I don't have any leaks underneath. We'll see you in the morning. Well, it's morning, and it's the moment of truth to see if I glued my tabletop to my outfit table. It's moving, so that's a good sign. Get these charcuterie boards out of the way. Let's have a look here. Yeah. I think we're good. All right, so I'm going to mix up more epoxy, pour that. By the end of the day, I should be able to flip it over and pour some on the other side. I was going to flip the slab over last night, but there were still a few little cracks in here that just weren't filled quite up to the top, so I mixed up a little batch and just topped them off. And now that's ready to be flipped over, and I'll start filling the epoxy on the other side. Nothing came through in the center there, in that bark inclusion, but I think it did come through here on that big crack. Yeah. I'm going to have to fill some of these big cracks here in stages. The reason I use the tabletop epoxy is that it dries quickly. The deep pour stuff takes days to dry. If I use the tabletop, I can pour it in, and then a day later I can start scraping it. But this here is going to be too big for that tabletop. So I think I'll just start putting some in. All right, gonna let that soak in, keep touching it up. Last night I finished topping off the epoxy. That's pretty much done now. So I really need to get the pockets done for the feet. All right, I'm going to grab my pieces. And I think I settled on it being about 8 inches from the ends. Still not sure what I'm going to do at this end. Got a notepad, got a pencil, got to sharpen the pencil. On the plus side, it didn't take very long to find the pencil. We're making progress in the shop. This is the base where I'm going to weld my legs to. And what I'm going to do on the program up at the house is just draw a box with these dimensions and then have it do a pocket on both ends of that box for these base plates. And then I'll have it just move down in maybe 1/4 inch increments, and that once this is pocketed out and this is pocketed out, I know they're going to be even, and so my table will sit flat. Does that make any sense? I have the impression that one end might be higher than the other. I moved my slab over here to the CNC table. This side over here was quite a bit higher. The slab is not consistent going all the way across. And I programmed it to go down 1/4 inch for each time it runs the program on both ends. And I will probably have to run it twice. I think the first time it might hit over here on this end, and certainly on the second pass it'll probably do the whole thing. I also raised this side of the slab up 1/4 inch. So when it's all said and done, there will be a 1/4 inch drop from this end of the table to the far end of the table. So if you bought the table, sorry. CNC is all done. Each time the program ran, it was going to go 1/4 inch deeper into the pockets. After I ran it the first time, I didn't want to go down another 1/4 inch. So what I did is I just put a spacer in there of about 1/8 inch, reset my Z height to that, and then ran the program again. And looks good. I got 2 good bases. There's a little bit here that's just low, but that's fine. Most of this looks like 80% of it's good. I've got my material all cut. I've cleaned up all the ends. I've got some 1-inch strap material here, which I weld onto the end. I've drilled and tapped a 5/16 18 coarse thread. There's a good selection of feet for that size thread. So I will weld that onto the end, and then the other end gets welded onto the base. I cut it at 10 degrees on both sides, so it'll look like that once it's on the base. Just a slight taper out. Broke out the new welding gloves, and I'm going to use the TIG welder for this because the MIG adds material to it, and I want these to be pretty flush, so I don't want to do a lot of grinding when I'm done. Also, something I forgot to mention, on the cold rolled 1x2, there's a seam on it, and I always like to hide that on the inside because I don't like to see it. Now that they're all tacked together, I'm just going to go ahead and weld them right around, and then I'll put them on the bases. So that's the cap. I'm going to call it the cap. Welded on the end of the tube, and now I am just going to weld them onto the base plate, but for that I'm going to use the MIG. The MIG's just faster. On one of these base plates, the feet or the legs are going to be right at the end, and on the other one they're going to be in a little bit because one end of the table is wider than the other. I don't want the feet protruding outside the vertical edge of the table. That way you won't stub your toes. I'm using a piece of 1-inch strap as a spacer because the 1 inch plus the 2 inch is 3. That leaves an inch on the other end of the 4-inch strap. So I'm just going to put this in position. Flip it around and do the same. you. Oh. Okay. Those are both tacked on, and it's just really looking at them to see that they're not too crooked, or they look good. So I'm going to place a couple more tacks. Come up. Set that aside, let it cool. Still straight? Yeah. If you've enjoyed this video so far, please hit the like button down below. Also, please subscribe to my channel. Plenty more projects coming. What's left? Need to take the tabletop outside with a belt sander and give it a good sanding to the point where we can take our orbital sander and work through the grits. We need to shape this end, cut this bit off, figure out how we're going to do that. So here's how I come up with the proportion of the legs. A coffee table should be between 16 and 18 inches tall, maximum of 18 inches, so I start with that. I go to Google SketchUp and I'll draw a box the width of my table. In this case it's 22 inches, but I'll actually subtract an inch or two. So I'll draw a box, say 20 inches wide by 15 inches tall. When you add the 1 inch for the leveling feet and the 2 inches for the top, that's 18 inches. And I will take guidelines and I'll go from the corner, come in at 10 degrees because my legs flare out at 10 degrees. So starting at the corner of that box, I'll come in to at 10 degrees and I'll offset another line 1 inch away from that one. And that way you can measure that length of that line going in where it intersects with your tabletop, and also the distance between the inner guidelines, and that gives your distance apart. You certainly don't need to use a computer program to lay this out. You could do it with a piece of cardboard and just draw to scale. And then use a protractor, put your angles in, and measure. We still need to connect the legs to the tabletop, and I use threaded inserts for that. I'll also drill out these holes once I've got the wood punched. I use the furniture screws, I've got the insert, and I've got a Forstner bit. And I'll leave the links to these down below. I've got a bit of tape there to show me when I've got to the correct length. I've got my center punch mark there. Also, if anyone out there has a better Forstner bit that doesn't do this, where you need to clear it, I'd love to hear from you. I use a little countersink bit just to take the edge off. I'll take my insert and I will just rub it against this paraffin wax. I have the Allen key for the inside of the insert. This furniture screw goes right in. In my effort to keep the shop a bit cleaner, I did a lot of the sanding outside, even though it was pretty chilly. I do spray some water on the top to make the grain stand out, and I do this between about 120 and 180. I only do it once though. If I didn't and put a finish on it, if the light hits it right, you will actually see the path I used with the flattening jig and router. So this gets rid of that. And once I sand it up to 180 grit, I then apply the Rubio Monocoat, and I will wait 36 hours and apply the maintenance oil for a bit of added depth. Well, the table's complete, and I think it looks very nice. I like the side I chose for the top, and I'm glad I kept more of the end of the table than I originally planned. The bottom side has less epoxy, which is a plus for me, but there is more figure and color variation on this side of the table, so I think it all worked out. Now my costs for the table are pretty low. Between the steel and the powder coating and the leveling feet, there's about $80 in the legs. I think the slab would be in the $100 to $120 range, although since I milled it, the cost of the lumber is pretty low. You could argue that when I cut the spalting off the other end of the table, I cut the value down quite a bit, but it did make some very nice charcuterie boards. Now how much will it sell for? Not enough. I can tell you that, but it's just the market I live in, and I don't want to deal with shipping. Luckily, this is my hobby and not my job. Would love to hear what you guys think, and if you have any questions, please write them in the comments section below. Thanks for watching.